Yes, we
Thumbs
can.
up? Great. Okay. All right. Well, good evening, everybody. My name is Tom Harrington, and I'm an attorney with Miaris and Harrington. I am your relatively new town counsel. So tonight, we're going to discuss the open meeting law, which I call the battle between transparency and efficiency. And the spoiler alert here is that efficiency lost. It's all about transparency. So as we move through tonight, I think you'd all agree that doing a deep dive into the open meeting law is always fun. I know I've been looking forward to it all day. But it's even more fun when we can do it in person. And the reason for that is that it's easier to turn this presentation into a conversation, which, in my opinion, is the best way to get comfortable with the nuances of the open meeting law. So to try to emulate that as best we can, I'm going to pause every few slides and ask if there are any questions. Please don't be shy. We learn the most when we learn from each other. You know, if it's something I think I'm going to get to in a few slides, I might ask you to hold the question, but you know, your experiences are probably going to resonate more with, you know, your fellow board and committee members than my experiences are. So I really want you to encourage you to share them. So now, without further ado, on to the presentation.
Is this too loud, honey? You want me to?
A little bit, but that's fine.
I can go upstairs.
Nope. Do you have Bluetooth on my computer?
I don't know.
I think someone needs to mute.
They see me if I look.
Okay, so let's assume you've just been appointed to, or elected or appointed to your public body or even a subcommittee. If that's the case, the open meeting law applies to you. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to go to the town clerk and get sworn in for your board or committee assignment. And the town clerk's going to do a few things. She's going to give you a copy of the open meeting law. She's going to give you a copy of the regulations. She may even give you a copy of the Attorney General's open meeting law guide. And if the board you're joining has violated the open meeting law in the last 5 years, she's going to give you a copy of the Attorney General's decision. So when you receive all these things, she likely has you sign something acknowledging that you've received them. So part of the reason for this is so that the Attorney General knows that you've received the materials on the open meeting law and that you'll be ready to obey the law. Okay. Practice pointer: for each time you are reelected or reappointed, you need to go back to the town clerk, get sworn in again, get the materials again, and sign whatever certification she has for you. Okay. All meetings of a public body must occur during a posted meeting with some minor exceptions. Okay, what is a meeting? Now I'm going to read a few definitions to you, and the key definitions here are what is a meeting and what is a deliberation, because if we can answer both those questions, we own the open meeting law. So a meeting is a deliberation by a quorum of a public body with respect to any matter within that body's jurisdiction, with certain limited exceptions. What is not a meeting? Okay, here are the exceptions. An on-site inspection is not a public meeting so long as you do not deliberate. So that I'm not picking on any board, because I love you all, I'm going to create what I'll call the Norfolk Space Board. So the Norfolk Space Board has 5 members, and what's within their jurisdiction is space travel. So if they are doing a site inspection looking for a new launch site, they don't need to post that meeting so long as they don't deliberate while they're on site. Now, if you are one of those boards that does regular site inspections and you want to deliberate when you're on site, you need to post that meeting. Okay. Attendance by a quorum at an event, provided you don't deliberate. So my space committee, all 5 of them can gather at a holiday party and they're fine. They don't need to post so long as they don't deliberate, which is talking about matters within their jurisdiction. Attendance by a quorum of a board at a meeting of another public body, provided there's no deliberations. So my space committee wants to go to the planning board. All 5 of them can go as long as they don't deliberate. And the practical advice here is it's probably better not to sit together, because when you sit together and start chatting, someone might think that you're deliberating. Okay, I'm going to stop there and ask, are there any questions? And if you can use the hand raising function, I think you come right to the top. I don't see anything. Rich, Betsy, you let me know if you see something.
I sure will, Tom.
Okay. All right. So let me go back. Okay. So the final piece, and the interesting piece, is that the Attorney General does not enforce the open meeting law at town meeting. So if you're at town meeting, whatever board you are, and you think you need to gather to discuss, vote, whatever you need to do, it's okay. They're not going to investigate an open meeting law violation. So that's your one get out of jail free card, is at a town meeting, you can, you don't need to post, and you can deliberate on matters within your jurisdiction. Okay, what is a deliberation? Now, this is important, and this is where we often run afoul of the open meeting law. And when I said in the battle between efficiency and transparency, transparency won, this is a good example of that. So a deliberation is an oral or written communication through any medium, including email, including Facebook, including, Instagram, between or among a quorum of a public body on any public business within its jurisdiction. One-sided communications can still be considered deliberations. Here's an example. So I've got my 5-member space committee, and the chair sends out an email saying, I think I found a great Launchpad site. It's here. I checked it out. I think everything's perfect. We'll talk about it at the next meeting. Sends that to a quorum of his board. The Attorney General would likely consider that to be an open meeting law violation because the chairman expressed an opinion to the other members, even though they didn't respond. He expressed an opinion on a matter within their jurisdiction. That should only be done at an open meeting. And so this is the trickiest part of the open meeting law, I think, is we have to be careful about email communications. And it extends to Facebook too, so that, if you post on Facebook, particularly in a private group, boy, I don't like, the application before my board, and, and another member chimes in or not, you've still expressed an opinion. And if the other members of your board might be in that private Facebook group, the Attorney General will likely consider that to be an open meeting law violation. Tom, is that a question?
Yes, it is. Just a quick one, Tom. I think the key word here you're saying is quorum. If you don't have a quorum, what happens then? Okay,
so a deliberation only occurs with a quorum present, but here's the tricky part. So 5-member board, and you, one member emails another member about a matter within their jurisdiction. Usually, I would say, okay, we're probably okay, but the Attorney General would investigate that because it's so easy to forward an email, right? So it can be a conversation between two. it's forwarded and all of a sudden a third member's in on it and knows what one or two other members thought. And, unfortunately, we may have violated the open meeting law. In this case, some of the advice is, sometimes the telephone is your best friend. So sometimes better if you just want to talk to another member and less than a quorum can talk about anything they want, sometimes the telephone is the way to go. Any other questions? Okay. Okay, what is not a deliberation? A subquorum, if not a subcommittee. So this is important, and this is the point Tom just raised. You have a 5-member board, 2 of you can talk about anything you want at any time, including jurisdictional matters, as long as you don't have the ability to kind of share that with another member. And so, the telephone, one calls the other, that's fine. If the second calls a third, says, yeah, I just talked to Tom Harrington and here's what he told me and I'm on that board, we may have violated the open meeting law. Okay, not a deliberation. Distribution of meeting agenda, scheduling, or procedural information. So, we can talk about on email amongst a quorum of the board where we're going to meet, when we're going to meet, what's on the agenda. I caution not to get too far into what's on the agenda. We can say, yes, let's put A, B, and C on the agenda, but we don't want to start offering opinions. But the agenda items are fair game. Scheduling, procedural information, we're going to take them in this order. That sort of thing is all okay and is not a deliberation. Distribution of reports or documents to be discussed, so long as no opinion of a member of the public body is expressed. So again, my space committee, the chair sends out a report that they've done on launch sites, and that's fine. He can send out the report to the other members and they can be prepared to discuss it at the next meeting. What he shouldn't do is say, here's the report, look at page 52. I think this, that really hits it on the head. In that instance, he has conveyed his opinion about this document, and that's likely a violation of the open meeting law.
I have a question.
Sure.
I send out to one of the boards, hypothetical, wherever they are, this report, and they email me back with a comment.
Okay.
If they email me directly without the other members, so one member sends me back a comment, then
Right.
separately, and so on, is that permissible?
Yes. So in this instance, Rich, you are Rich McCarthy, planning director.
Yeah.
So I don't know if anyone's ever heard me talk about the difference between daytime government and nighttime government, but nighttime government are all you boards and committees that meet at night, that live in Norfolk, that are elected or appointed to your boards. You are what I call unpaid elected or appointed officials. Rich and I are daytime government in that we weren't elected or appointed to our positions technically, and we can't violate the open meeting law. So, Rich, when Rich McCarthy, planning director, sends out the report, it's fine. When a single member responds back, if they reply all, that's not good, especially if they're offering a comment. If they reply directly to you, that's not a problem. You can have a dialogue with that person. What I would caution is don't forward that email to the rest of the board. Tom Harrington, board member, said this, everybody. So now you're kind of instigating the open meeting law violation. Mm-hmm. But the communication one-on-one between you, or 2 of them want to come into the office and talk to you about it, less than a quorum, that's okay.
Okay.
I think we have another raised hand. Chad?
Yes. So if Rich sends out an email, so I'm on the planning board. If Rich sends out an email to all of us and it's regarding scheduling or agenda items, we can reply all as long as we don't provide any opinion. If we're just saying, yeah, I can make that I can make that special meeting on that Thursday, and I would add this as an agenda item, but as long as we don't give opinion, we're good to go if we reply all.
Yep. Yes, exactly,
Okay.
Chad. If you say, let's add this one because, I want to blow this project up, we now know why. But, just kind of the straight, where are we going to meet? When are we going to meet? What are we going to discuss? That's all okay.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure, because it is at times a lot more convenient to reply all, just so everybody's aware of it. But
Right.
as long as we keep it to the basics, without opinion, we're good to go. All right.
Right.
Thank
Exactly. And one of the fascinating parts of the open meeting law is that individuals don't violate the open meeting law. Boards violate the open meeting law. So, so if someone were to file a complaint that my space committee violated the open meeting law, it would be my committee that would be chastised, not any single one of them, even if it was clearly, one of them that screwed up. So neither here nor there, just kind of an interesting piece. Okay. Okay, so that in a nutshell is, what's a meeting and what's a deliberation. And I'm going to go through kind of some other board practice points. And if anyone wants to come back to those issues, feel free, everything's open. But if you've mastered those two concepts, you now have control of the open meeting law. Okay, so we're still in this kind of remote participation world that the state has allowed us to do with our Zoom meetings, and that we can continue doing them until April 1st, unless the state extends that deadline or makes it permanent. I will say I've been checking and I haven't seen a lot of activity on that. So, it doesn't mean that the legislatures won't do it last minute, and maybe they're going to read, kind of where we are in the pandemic. But as of now, if things were to get better, I suspect they're not going to continue that. I think it might come to an end, but we'll see. But right now we're in the world of the Zoom meeting. So here's some of your kind of practice pointers and rules for Zoom meetings. So when you're meeting remotely, the chair should announce the names of all members participating remotely at the start of the meeting, or allow each member to identify themselves. All votes, whatever the vote is, in a remote meeting must be taken by roll call. Your meetings, if you're meeting remotely, must be accessible to the public. So what does that mean? So one is live streaming. Zoom, we have Zoom meetings. You can also do a conference call telephone. Even local access television is sufficient so that the public can follow along with you, but there must also be an opportunity for someone to comment. And so sometimes do, the local access with a call-in line. And the key to the call-in line is there must be someone manning the phone during the meeting, so that you can't say, if you want to, if you want to talk at tonight's meeting, let us know by 4:00 and we'll put you on the list. The public is allowed to determine if they want to talk kind of in real time. And so someone should be manning the phone if that's the way you choose to make your meeting accessible to the public. Recordings of the meeting, not in real time, are not sufficient. I suspect this isn't a Norfolk problem, but there were other towns where they were meeting on Zoom and recording it and just sharing the recording the next day, and that's not sufficient. Okay, let's talk about your meeting notices / agendas. We must post them 48 hours before the meeting, and that excludes weekend days and holidays. We must list the location and time of the meeting. And if it's a remote meeting, we must list how that person or how the public can participate or listen into the meeting. The agenda items must reasonably advise the public about what you are going to discuss. And practice pointer, if executive session is the only topic, you must first open in open session before going into executive session. And it's more than a few boards have been dinged on this one. The Attorney General takes this one very seriously. So you can't just kind of start your meeting in executive session. You always start in open session and then move to executive session. Any questions on agendas? So a question I would often get on agendas is what about posting something with less than 48 hours notice? And that's okay, that's allowable, but it must meet this test. You must be able to say that the chair could not reasonably have known that it would be a topic of discussion at the meeting, and that it's timely, it needs to be discussed. So, for instance, on my space committee, if we had an opportunity to buy a spaceship, but we just got it 24 hours before our meeting, and the deal's going to end quickly, I would say, let's amend the agenda to discuss the purchase of the spaceship, and do whatever we need to do. And then at our following meeting, I would tell the space committee to kind of share with the public that component of the meeting, that here's what we discussed and here's what we voted, so that they're up to speed. And I think if someone were to try to ding you with an open meeting law violation, I think the Attorney General would be satisfied with handling it that way. Not seeing any hands. Okay. Minutes. Okay. Minutes are becoming increasingly important, and maybe not so much in Norfolk, but in other towns, we're seeing big battles over minutes. So here's your rules on minutes. Minutes must include the date of the meeting, the time of the meeting, the place of the meeting, and the members present. It must identify those members participating remotely. So if you're a hybrid, if everyone's remote, then you list everyone's remote. If it's a hybrid meeting where, 3 of you are in town hall and 2 of you are Zooming in, you need to specifically identify that in your minutes. And, kind of where the rubber meets the road on minutes is that you are required to provide sufficient detail to reasonably advise individuals not at the meeting what transpired at the meeting. So I can't really give you a much better definition than that. What I can tell you is, if you talked about a topic for 45 minutes, 2 sentences is probably not enough, right? So there's, you need to apply that, those kind of standards. So, but you don't need to do a transcript. It is not a transcript. We don't need to know what everyone said. We need to know votes, and we need to know the general tenor of the conversation, but we don't need to know Tom Harrington said this and Bob said that. And, we don't need to get into that level of detail, just kind of the tenor of the conversation. And here's it kind of at the bottom is the next practice pointer. You need to list any documents or other exhibits used at the meeting. And we're actually starting to see a number of violations, open meeting law violations, because boards aren't doing this. So let's talk about what it means to use a document at a meeting. What the Attorney General has told us is that it needs to be physically present. it needs to be verbally identified, and the contents of the documents need to be discussed. And it can be a quick discussion, but there needs to be some discussion. So, if my space committee has a report in front of it, and, then it's physically present. If I say, yep, we've got the space pod report in front of us, okay, now I verbally identified it. If we start to talk about that report, we now need to either identify that document in the minutes. Well, I should say you must identify that document in the minutes. I think that better practice is to actually attach it, but you don't have to. You just need to identify it. The reason I suggest attaching it is, 5 years from now, someone pulls out those minutes and wants to see the report, and then we're scrambling to find it. Whereas if we just attached it by PDF, we have it right there. Okay, any questions? Nope. Oh, okay. And finally, minutes. We list all decisions made, all action taken, and we include a record of each vote, roll call votes where appropriate. Approval of minutes. So,
I'm sorry. I had a question on that.
Okay.
So how should we on the minutes write down, like, say, Tim Martin, the way I've been writing it is Tim Martin will entertain the motion. And then, Joe might second it. And then, do you have to list that out?
You should. Yeah. And so I guess maybe the one suggestion I might make is, instead of saying that the chair entertained a motion, because I know chairs often say, I'm looking for a motion.
Right.
But what's actually happening is he might be saying what the motion is, but then someone says, so moved. And in that instance, what we want to list is who moved the motion and who seconded the motion. So it is important to list those two things.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Okay. Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay. So approving minutes. So this is the other thing that sometimes some boards can get so wrapped up in the business at hand that they forget about their minutes. But the rules are that we're supposed to approve our minutes within 30 days or within 3 meetings, whichever is later. So my space committee just meets once a month. So we don't need to approve our minutes other than every 3 months. But, if some of the busier boards, if you're meeting weekly, you're approving a set of minutes at least every 3 weeks. And so I just want you to keep up with that, because, if someone files an open meeting law violation, we don't want to get dinged for not having our minutes ready. Minutes, both in draft form and in final form, not executive session minutes, but regular session minutes, are public records, as are any documents used at the meeting. So again, remembering the discussion of what it means to use a document at a meeting, if a document was used in open session at a meeting, it is a public record. So and that's how you can protect it. If it's not ripe for release, there are ways to protect it, but once you bring it to the meeting and identify it and talk about it, you've lost that protection. So that's just something to file away. Yes, Betsy.
Tom, so if we're at a planning board meeting and I display, say, a site plan dated December 16th up on our screen, is it good enough that I just, if I just mention that in my, if I just mention that in my meeting minutes, is that adequate enough? If we were
right. So you put a
dated, blah 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 was displayed or something like that.
Yep, you've identified it.
Okay, perfect.
That's fine.
All right, great. Thank you.
Okay. So approval of the minutes, and this is now for executive session minutes, and we're going to talk about executive session in a second. So It's the same as open session, three meetings or 30 days, whichever is later. You can approve executive session minutes either in open session or in executive session. If you approve, and you can approve executive session minutes in open session and not release them to the public. They can remain private, but I don't recommend it because if you start talking about them, you've now made them a public record. So executive session minutes are not subject to release until the board determines that whatever reason you went into executive session is now over and the public can read those minutes. My advice is about every 3 months, look at your executive session minutes and make a determination about whether or not you think, so the classic one is we're buying a piece of land, we meet about it in executive session, we go through the process. Once we own the piece of land or walk away from it and kind of are no longer negotiating, I think you can then release those minutes. But, if it is something you can talk about in executive session. Practice pointer is you can designate a single person, for ripeness. You can say, we're not going to do this every 3 months. The chair, the chair knows what's going on. The chair can determine when these minutes are ripe for review. And then he or she would announce them in open session. And once the minutes, once the executive session minutes are voted to release, they are public records. There may be documents associated with those executive session minutes that are not ready to be released. And so you're going to want to think about both. Okay, we're ready to release the minutes, but there's some sensitivity to a report on a personnel complaint or something that we're not going to release. Okay, here's your trap for the unwary. So looking down at the bottom, under the public records law, when someone requests documents, we have 10 days to produce or respond. Under the open meeting law, specifically for minutes, we must produce those minutes in 10 calendar days. So this is, we need to separate minutes from everything else, and it's only 10 calendar days. And if we get a request for executive session minutes at the next meeting, it should immediately trigger a review to determine if those minutes are ripe for release. And that's a discussion you can have in executive session. So if someone asks for your meeting about real estate and someone asks for those minutes and you're not ready to release them, you can go into executive session under the same purpose that you went into to discuss the purchase of real estate, review the minutes and discuss whether or not you think they're going to be released. And if the answer is no, you just come out and say, no, they're not ripe for release yet. Betsy, you got another question?
Tom, doesn't that trigger another set of executive session minutes, though?
It can, yeah.
It seems
So
like there
is kind of the spinning wheel of executive sessions where you're going into review and then you need to produce minutes that said we reviewed the executives, the previous executive session minutes. So when you have a pretty good sense that it's time to release them, you review your executive session minutes in open session, and that, kind of
right.
ends the spin.
Okay, thank you.
Debbie Robbins? I think you're muted.
Can you hear me now?
I can.
So I'm on the Board of Assessors, and when we review abatement applications and certain exemption applications, isn't it true that those stay executive because those applications are supposed to not be public knowledge?
So Debbie, you stumped the chump. I think the answer to that is yes, but I'm not
Okay.
positive. So I'm going to look into it and get back to you with an answer.
Okay. You can get back to the office.
Can I
got
chime in
it.
here for a second?
I'm sorry?
Can I
I said
chime
you
in for a second? I am in the assessor's office and I have all the paperwork on that. And if you discuss something that is under the privacy laws, which they do because there are taxes and veterans disability paperwork and things like that.
Right.
The paperwork I have from the state says that they stay
Always remains private.
forever.
Yeah. I think that's right. Is that who is that Chris talking?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, Chris. So I guess the what it was kind of going through my head was I'm comfortable with those applications. I was wondering if there's any application that might be considered private, but that might not stick. So I was going to look into that.
Yeah, the only things that we typically do in executive session are the senior exemptions, the veterans exemptions, which all
Okay.
have
Yeah, those are fine.
personal information. So I have a FAQ from the state with those questions about assessors' executive session minutes.
Okay. Perfect. Yeah, if it's just those two issues, I agree. Those never become public.
Okay, all right, great, thanks.
Sure. Okay, so purposes for executive session. There are only 10 statutory reasons to enter executive session, and I'm not going to touch on them all because there's some that we towns really just never use. But the procedures, no matter what purpose you're using, are as follows. You always convene an open session. And I know I've said this a lot tonight, but I really want to make sure I get that point home. Always convene an open session first and then go into executive session. You move to enter into executive session, which the motion kind of generically covers the board members. If there's anyone else that you want to invite into executive session, the motion should list those people. So, if it's daytime staff, if it's town council, whoever it is, you are certainly allowed to have others into executive session, but the motion should include those people. There are certain times when the chair of the board needs to declare that one of the reasons they're going into executive session is because if you were to discuss this matter in open session, it would have a detrimental impact on the town. So we'll see those specifically, but that is typically part of the motion if you're in purpose 3, 6, or 8. And we'll go through those specifically. You should always specify whether your board will return to open session for reasons other than adjourning. So, the motion usually says, and we'll come back and pick up our usual agenda at the end of executive session if you have more to discuss, or we will exit executive session only for the purposes of adjourning the meeting. And then the public knows that nothing's happening after executive session. I'm not going to hang around, or something is happening after executive session. I will hang around. Okay. Roll call votes always, whether in person or on Zoom, to go into executive session and on any votes taken during executive session. And the reason for that is so that when the public's reading our executive session minutes in a year, 2 years, 5 years, they are entitled to know how each board member voted. Oh, I think I went backwards. So the final piece on our Zoom meetings, this is advice from the Attorney General. When you're on Zoom, you're in a Zoom meeting and you've gone into executive session, it is appropriate for each member to confirm to the other members that they cannot be overheard. I'm in a room alone and the door is closed. Okay. So now the purpose is to go into executive session. Purpose 1 is to discuss the reputation, character, physical condition, or mental health rather than professional competence of an individual, or to discuss the discipline or dismissal of or complaints or charges against a public officer, employee, or staff member or individual. So this is the rotten one. This is the one that, if someone's filed a complaint against your staff member that your board oversees, or they've been charged with a crime, this is the purpose you would talk about it. But note where it says rather than professional competence. So unfortunately, if your staff member, if that's who's in the meeting, is just not doing a very good job, you can't go into executive session to talk about it. That's information that the public is entitled to. And if you want to have that discussion, you need to have it in open session. Along with this one, it's important to know that if you're talking about a complaint filed against someone, that person is entitled to join executive session if they so choose. They are entitled to 48 hours notice of the executive session. They are entitled to have a lawyer present if they wish, and they're entitled to ask that this session be held in open session instead of executive session. So this is one of those ones where you're going to want to contact, someone in town hall, probably Blythe, to let them know that it's a legal matter, and we're going to want to make sure we do that right. Okay. Finally, if an open meeting law complaint is ever filed against your board, you would meet to discuss it under purpose 1. Okay. Purpose 2, to conduct strategy sessions and preparations for negotiations with non-union personnel, or to conduct collective bargaining sessions or contract negotiations with non-union personnel. So if you're hiring and you're allowed to give a contract, this is the one you'd use. But this is kind of limited to the big boards. On your motion, you should identify on the motion, you must identify the non-union personnel or the union. The public body must vote in open session to execute any non-union contract, and it may approve the final terms of collective bargaining agreement in executive session, but it should, but doesn't have to, disclose it in open session. Okay, purpose 3 is our litigation. If we think we're going to be sued or we're being sued or we want to talk about litigation, we talk about it under purpose 3. It's also a collective bargaining for the big boards. This is one of those ones where the chair must declare. So if you want to talk about litigations, the chair needs to declare that an open session would have a detrimental effect on the town's position. And for litigation, while the litigation does not need to be filed, it must be pending or imminently threatened. And so you really need to be able to say, with some degree of confidence that there's a pretty good chance we're going to get sued. And then we can talk about it in executive session. Purpose 6 is the one we use for real estate. So we can consider the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property if the chair declares that an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the negotiating position of the public body. You should consider identifying the property in the motion and the notice for the meeting, but you don't have to, particularly if you think it's a sensitive topic. So it's one of those ones where if everyone knows that we're looking at a piece of land, then it's appropriate to identify that piece of land. If there's some reason that it benefits the town to not mention it, then we don't need to include it in the notice or the motion. Okay, so this is one of the hiring ones. We can meet in executive session to consider or interview applicants for employment or appointment by a preliminary screening committee if the chair declares that an open meeting will have a detrimental effect on obtaining qualified applicants. And so in the municipal world, if we're looking for, kind of a new fill in the blank, chances are they're working for another town and they may not want that other town to know that they're out there looking for a new position. And so we don't want to put a chill into our ability to hire a new person. So for screening committees, we can meet in executive session and not reveal those preliminary applicants. So this is for preliminary screening committees. It does not apply to meetings of a committee to consider and interview applicants who have already passed a prior preliminary screening. So there's no perfect way to define this, but if you start out with 8 applicants, you can use a preliminary screening committee. Once you're down to the final 3 or 4, it's time to go public. And the screening committee can never contain a quorum or more of the parent body. So, if my space committee wants to hire a pilot and we want to create a screening committee, we can't put 3 of us on the screening committee. And in this instance, the chair must so declare that it's going to have a detrimental effect on our ability to obtain qualified applicants. Any questions? No? Okay. Okay, so here's the thing. If you believe that you have violated the open meeting law, and you know what, we all screw up, we all make mistakes, it happens. You want to contact our office, and my advice is through Blythe. Let Blythe know that either you've received a complaint or you just kind of, I think we screwed up. We can help. And the key here is self-reporting. Is looked upon very favorably by the Attorney General. We met, we thought we posted an agenda, we didn't post an agenda, we met anyways, we're sorry. You let the Attorney General know, you let them know what you're going to do to fix it. We're going to hold another meeting, we're going to post it, we're going to let everyone know what we did, and we're going to, kind of redo the discussion again and redo any votes we took, and the Attorney General will be absolutely fine. So it happens, but it's the response to the mistake that's important here. Okay, so that concludes my presentation. Are there any final questions of any stripe that anyone would like to ask?
Yes.
Go ahead, Tom.
Yes. Got a question. When you have an agenda and the things that you need to talk about are on the agenda, and someone would like to talk about something else not on the agenda, are you allowed to do that?
So there's kind of 2 things here, right? So when we put an agenda item and we discuss it, the Attorney General understands that, organically during a discussion, it's going to take twists and turns and it can go in various directions. And they're not going to be super strict about that, as long as it kind of flows organically from an agenda item. But since you're asking the question, if it was a matter that really wasn't on the agenda,
correct.
My advice would be to wait until the next meeting, unless you believe that it's that you couldn't have known about this before this person brought it up or before the 48 hours when you posted your notice, and it's of sufficient importance that it needs to be addressed.
Okay.
In those 2 instances, then you can discuss it. But I'm going to tell you, but then at your next meeting, you're going to say, okay, we had an issue, it popped up, we felt it was really important to discuss, so we did. But you're going to fill in the public after the fact. And so say you post your agenda on a Tuesday, and on a Wednesday, you learn, wow, there's this issue that, this is timely. We need to discuss it on Thursday. Amend your agenda on Wednesday. Amend your agenda an hour before the meeting, right? So if you can give the public any notice, you should give the public notice. And if you can tick those boxes, you can discuss it. But you want to make the correction after the fact to let the public know that it couldn't wait till the next meeting. You discussed it. You're going to kind of share that discussion again, so the public can participate.
Okay. Thank you.
Looks like Story Heights Church has a question.
Hey, sorry about that. It's Tyler Tullis. Just, the Zoom accounts crossover, how that goes. But this question came up last night at the ZBA meeting, and Mr. Martin there suggested we ask you tonight. I am Richard, is it a volunteer associate member? Is that the official description?
Yes.
Yeah, and I just had the question last night of am I, as a volunteer associate member of that that board, am I allowed to, when a motion is requested or a second for a motion is requested, am I allowed to, make a motion or read a motion or second, or am I just there as kind of a fill in as needed? And just for the record, I'm happy to be whatever is needed.
Yeah.
I just am just looking for some clarity.
Right. So it's a good question. 10-point ZBA. So here's how that works, right? So there are, how many members of your ZBA, Rich?
5.
5 full members?
Mm-hmm.
And how many associates?
2.
Okay. All right. So we have our 5 full members. It's a 5-member board, so that if all 5 of our full members are there, they're our starting 5. They're the only ones that participate. You are essentially just a member of the public. But if one leaves or one doesn't show up, then the chair has the ability to call up, for lack of a better term, one of the associate members. So at such time as the chair identifies you as a board member for that hearing, you are a full member. You can do whatever you want. But until the chair does that, you're just a member of the public. Got it? That makes sense?
Now, Tom, what about if one of the members just leaves the room to take a phone call and they could be gone from the room for about 10 minutes or so? Can then the associate member, or do we have to put the meeting on pause? And
so if, say we're, doing a hearing on 1 Main Street and one of our 5 leaves the room, if the hearing is still going on, we can't kind of pull in a sub for the 10 minutes that our starting member stepped out for. So the best thing to do is to either pause it or, kind of temporarily adjourn and go and talk about something else for the next 10 minutes until he comes back. That would be my advice, but we can't bring in a member for 10 minutes.
okay, thank you.
Yeah, and this Joe Sebastiano has a question.
Just to moderate, so Donna, it'll be Donna Jones, Chad, and then you, Joe, okay?
That's fine. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Rich.
Yep.
This is Donna Jones.
Hi, Donna.
I have a question. For example, if a 5-member board posts the meeting that it is in person, there is no mention of any remote access, and then some members of the board telephone in and are asked to vote, does a majority of the board have to be in person?
So in that instance, right, so we're under these kind of, weird COVID rules right now. So in that instance, if you post a live meeting, you need to hold a live meeting. And if you're holding a live meeting, then if you're holding a live meeting, then you've got your quorum present at the location, and you want 2 members to call in. So in normal times, a town has the ability through its board of selectmen to allow, if you have a quorum present, the remaining 2 can call in and participate remotely. It's my understanding that Norfolk hasn't adopted remote participation like that. So in your instance, I think you could do it, but the agenda should reflect it. So ahead of time, it should say it's going to be a hybrid meeting, and some members will be live in person and other members would be calling in. But I'm and I'll double check this because this is a pretty good question. I'm not comfortable saying that without the agenda identifying it, you can just automatically allow 2 members to call in because Norfolk hasn't adopted remote participation.
I was thinking, like, if the chair showed up in the room, the public can go to the room, and the other 4 members could be on the phone.
Oh, that's different. That's a Zoom meeting, right? So if you have only 1 member present and the public wants to come into that, and you want to kind of host the public in a meeting room, but the other 4 members, that create your quorum are all phoning in.
Yes.
That's okay, but that's a Zoom meeting. And yes, you could do that to say, if you want to come to the meeting. Oh, so the question here is.
I'm talking telephone, not necessarily Zoom.
Right. But the question here is, are you trying to limit so that the public can't use the phone line? Or could the public call in too?
Would we have to post the party line? I arrange a meeting and I say, everybody calls this phone number that wants to phone in.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think you would need to share if the way the public, if you're giving the public 2 forms of participation, 1, show up in person, or 2, phone in, and a quorum of you is phoning in, I think it's important to allow the public to at least listen in that way. I'll double check that there. I might be wrong, but I think that would be appropriate.
Thank you.
Yep.
Chad?
Yeah, so if you have, on the planning board, we have 5 full members and 1 associate. And so let's say that one of the members has to recuse himself from one of the agenda items. Can you call that associate up to participate in that one agenda item and vote?
So Rich, you correct me if I'm wrong, but usually as planning board associates don't work the same way as zoning board associates. And in this instance, it's, you 5 were elected and it's you 5. And so the associate members are there to learn, but they can't participate.
Okay.
Unless it was,
so that's the same. So
You
that would be
disagree,
the
Rich?
same thing if.
well, it was a special permit, right? So, but that's not what you're asking though, Chad, right?
So does your bylaw allow associate members to participate in planning board special permits?
Yes.
Okay. So in that instance, for that purpose, it would be okay.
Okay. So if we had a member that was out sick one evening, could the associates fill in that role or not, because our board's different than ZBA?
But is it a one-night hearing? Or is it kind of one of 5?
It would depend. So like there are times where like an agenda may have continuance of 2 or 3 items, and then it may have 2 or 3 new items.
Right. So I would say if it's a continued hearing and the associate was not in on the original hearing, the associate should not come in.
Okay.
Take someone's slot.
I got you. Okay.
But if they can do all the hearings, I think it's okay.
Okay.
As allowed by your bylaw.
Okay. Yeah, it's a little muddy, but yeah, I think I understand. Thank you.
Joe?
Yeah, hi. So my question is that, and it might apply to other boards, is that when you have an associate member who has a contributing question, something to say during the hearing, do they have to be recognized as a member of the public, or can they just speak as a member of the board?
So associate members, in limited circumstances, in this case for zoning or planning, actually have a role to play, if they're called up. If they're not, it's more of an informal term, so we have associate members because it's a good way to train members, but they don't really have a standing other than they might receive the agenda and get invited to site walks and the like. So in that instance, the chair does not have to recognize them.
Right, but the chair can recognize them when they want to contribute with either a question
Sure.
or comment about the current hearing, and
Absolutely.
they recognize it as at least an associate member, correct?
It's a title you've given them. I have no problem if you
okay.
say, associate member Jim.
No, thank you. No, I think some of the associate comments are very, very important in some cases.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Tom?
Yeah, Tom, we have a meeting and it's a live meeting. Yet we have a member or two who can't make the meeting. They're out of state and they call in.
Mm-hmm.
Are they allowed to vote on any issue, or are they restricted from voting?
So because right now we're in these special COVID rules, they can vote. And again, I think your agenda should identify the fact that they're going to call in. They can vote. Once that goes away, they cannot vote by phone, and they actually really shouldn't even be participating by phone. In normal times, that's an election of the selectmen to allow that. And unless and until they do, it's not allowed in Norfolk.
Okay, thank you. That's what I thought.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Rich, I think.
Do the last call.
Yeah.
Any last questions anyone has?
Just an administrative question again, Tom. I'm sorry, I'm relatively new at this.
No problem.
If I go through some old, say I'm looking through and I noticed that there was an error on a notice of intent or something, a number was incorrect, but it's already been posted. So it's been given, the meeting minutes have been, everything's, made public. Do I just make the correction and bring it down to the town clerk and have a new minutes posted? Or is there anything special that I need to do?
Well, so I think it's a good idea to amend the minutes, even if they've been finalized, to, reopen them and make the change, but only the board can do that. So we shouldn't kind of on our own correct minutes unless they vote on it. But if we see an error, I think it's appropriate to bring it back to them to the next meeting and say, hey, listen, these 4 and 5 got transcribed. It should be 5-4.
Okay.
And amend the minutes accordingly.
Okay.
Great. Well, thank you.
Sure. So it's been a pleasure talking to you all, and I look forward to getting to know more of you and seeing you around town hall.
Thanks, Tom.
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate
All right,
it.
everybody. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays. Take care.